Well, hello, and it's that time of year again when I'm making my Christmas cake. It's always a nerve-wracking thing to do, even when you've been doing it for so many years. And one of the worst things that I find is just thinking about it. The best thing to do is just to get cracking and enjoy it. And this recipe that I've developed is one that will not go wrong. So you don't have to have all those nerves prior to making it. It's so easy, and there are some things that I do in the recipe that I'll explain to you that make it a foolproof, easy Christmas cake. And if you want to find it in a book, it's actually in my seasonal cookery book. It's on page 220, and it's all the details of it are in there as well. But it's the same as we're making today. Now, one of the things that does get me wound up is to preparing my tin. I don't know why, it always does, but if you get that done first, then it's out of the way. And the tin I'm using today is a 20cm square tin, but as long as it's quite deep, you can use a 23cm diameter round tin if you prefer. Sometimes I do, sometimes I use a square. But today, I'm using the square one. And what I always do is I butter it. And then, no matter whether it's a non-stick or not, I still butter it, and then I line it with baking paper, not greaseproof, baking paper. And I put one strip one way, that fits exactly, and the same the other way. And then I cover the outside with 2 thick layers of aluminium foil. You can wrap greaseproof round it or brown paper, tying it off, but I find aluminium foil does the same job and it's much easier to do, so you haven't got the hassle. But then always put it on a baking sheet, and there are 2 reasons for that. The first one is it's so much easier to get in and out of the oven with, because you can grab hold of that. The other thing is that it protects the base of your cake while it's cooking. So you've got your sides and your base covered with extra protection while it's cooking so it doesn't burn. And now we're going to add our ingredients. There's 225 grams of butter, 225 grams of soft light brown sugar. Now sometimes you get your lumps in your brown sugar, so all you need to do is use your fingers and just squeeze the lumps away, and it will be fine. Don't worry about that. Just do the big ones, you don't have to do the small ones. And then the next thing that goes in at the beginning is black treacle. And black treacle is quite a sticky thing to use, so make sure you've got a hot spoon ready. And I just dip it into very hot water before I use it. And you need 1 tablespoon in your bowl. And then we'll cream them all together. Got all our fruit in the bowl, the kilogram of fruit, and you can use any type of dried fruit that you like. I've got sultanas, raisins and cherries, which are our favourite. And I tend to use about 300 grams of cherries to 700 grams of raisins, sultanas. You add currants, cranberries, the dried cherries. You can add any pineapple, whatever you fancy, so long as it comes to a kilogram. And then into the fruit, I stir in my ground almonds. And you need 100 grams of nuts. Now it can be 50 grams of ground almonds, or it can be 50 grams of chopped almonds, or it can be all, as we prefer, ground almonds. And you simply stir that into your fruit mixture at the beginning. Now as for your flour, it's 265 grams of plain flour, and it can be white or a mixture of white and wholemeal, which is what I tend to use. Now you need to sieve into that 2 teaspoons of baking powder, no more, no less. It just gives a little bit of a lift to your cake without it rising too much. And also you can add your spices at that time. I use 1 level teaspoon of ground cinnamon, half a level teaspoon of mixed spice, and half a level teaspoon of grated nutmeg, freshly grated nutmeg. I like to grater it with a tiny little grater. But you can add more mixed spice if you wish, but that is the quantities that I like and my family likes. Simply sieve those together, but remember, if you're using wholemeal flour, and I've used half and half, I would always put all those little grains that are left in your sieve after sieving back into your flour and just give it a quick stir, and then your flour is ready to use. It's time to add the eggs, but before we do that, this is the first stage when you could go wrong. This is the first stage that people find they have trouble with. It's when you're adding quite a lot of eggs, and there are 5 eggs in this recipe that you've got to add to your cream mixture. And what happens is your mixture curdles, or it separates when you're adding your eggs. The way to stop that is by adding 4 tablespoons of your flour mixture, and just simply sieve that into the mixture and then fold it into there, and then you can just add your eggs all in one go. You simply whisk them in and your mixture will be perfectly okay, which we'll see. Just before you add your egg mixture, when you've beaten your eggs lightly, add your lemon juice from 1 lemon and the zest as well, because you just have the zest and the lemon juice of 1 lemon, and that lifts the flavour of your cake. So add that to your eggs mixture before you put it into your cake. Now we've got our eggs incorporated into our mix, it's time to sort out our flour and our fruit. And this is the next stage that will make your cake completely foolproof. A lot of people have problems with their Christmas cake fruit sinking to the bottom during the cooking time. And that's because your fruit tends to be moist and sticky. What you can do now is you can add the rest of your flour to your fruit, and you simply stir it in and make sure it's all your fruit is evenly covered with the flour, and then you can just pop it into the bowl and fold it in all together, one simple step, using a large metal spoon. You simply spoon into the tin all over the base, making sure that you don't plop it all into the middle. Put a spoon in each part of the base as you go, pressing it down, so there are no air pockets in it. And fill up, and you'll find that you'll think, oh, I've got far too much mixture for this tin, but you won't have, because you're pressing it down as you go along, and that stops the mixture from getting air bubbles in that become holes in your cake. So press it down, and when it's nice and smooth on the top, we need to think about the depression in the centre. And the depression is to stop your cake from rising too much in the centre. If you notice, a lot of cakes will rise in the centre and not as much around the side. But if you make a nice depression in the centre first of all, that will stop that happening, and you'll get a nice smooth top, which you'll see later when the cake's cooked. So simply make sure that it's all pressed down well and you're ready to go. So now you're ready to put your cake in the oven. Now you've preheated your oven to 160 degrees, gas mark 3. We're going to turn it down now, just before we put the cake in the oven, to 150 degrees, gas mark 2. And you're going to leave it in there to cook for 30 minutes, no more, no less. And after the 30 minutes, we're not going to look at the cake, we're just going to turn the heat down to 140 degrees, gas mark 1, and then we're going to leave it for 90 minutes before we do anything else to it. Now I don't think it's quite done, I think it still needs its extra 10 minutes, but I'm going to check just in case. It's nice and flat. Now we're going to use the skewer in the centre like I said. You see there's still some mixture on there, so I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to do it into another place as well. There's not too much on that part, but I know it's not cooked yet, so I'm going to give it another 10 minutes. Probably another 20 minutes, because it's only on the low lights now. Now it's had its extra time, so I'm going to check and see how it's doing now. But don't be tempted to turn your oven off just yet. Just make sure, even after the second time, because it still may need a little bit extra time. But don't give it any more than 10 minutes at any one time, because you don't want it to overcook. I think that's cooked now. Again, I've pressed it into a different place, right in the centre, and there's no mixture whatsoever on the skewer. So I think that's cooked now. So I'm not going to bake it anymore. It's going to come out of the oven now, and I'm going to leave it to cool on a cooling rack in the tin for half an hour. And then I'll lift it out, but I won't do anything else to it. I won't take the paper off until it's completely cool. Because often you'll find that bits of fruit will stick to the paper, even though it's baking paper. It can still stick to it while it's hot, but it won't when it's cold.